Lots of research shows that drugs and crime are linked. Over half of those who are involved in federal prisons, state prisons, and jails report regular drug use. And when you look at the diagnosis of substance abuse disorders specifically, you find that within incarcerated populations, a high percentage meet the diagnostic criteria for substance abuse disorders. In addition, we know that many people are under the influence of both drugs and alcohol at the time that they commit crimes, including violent crimes, property crimes, and drug trafficking crimes. So we have lots of different evidence-based treatments and approaches that we know can be delivered within the criminal justice system that match onto what's happening within the system when an individual is involved. In fact, we look at involvement in criminal justice as providing a window of opportunity to intervene in substance abuse and addictive disorders. But we also know that most people are unable to actually be able to benefit from treatment. So if you look across the entire criminal justice system, including those who are under some form of community supervision and those who are incarcerated, we estimate that over 5 million adults are in need of a substance abuse intervention, and yet less than 25% actually receive any type of intervention, and that includes drug education. And drug education in and of itself, which teaches people about substance use disorders, is not what we would consider to be an evidence-based treatment. It's not sufficient to really help address the underlying root causes of addictive disorders.
Becoming a police officer was always something I was interested in from childhood. Had the opportunity to speak to people that were involved in the field, became interested in it, began my career as a dispatcher, worked for 2 other police departments before I came to Middletown. Was fortunate to be hired by my hometown in 1993. Had the opportunity to work in the patrol division, traffic safety detective bureau. Eventually was promoted a few times and found myself becoming the chief of police in 2014. I think it's Cornett's book, One Police Plaza, where the line in the prologue is law enforcement is a front row seat to the greatest show on earth, being human life. It really gives you an opportunity to help people and make a difference in the world every day. It can be a blessing and a curse. When we have certain critical incidents, we provide what's known as critical incident stress debriefing. They'll meet with mental health professionals to discuss things they've seen and participated in to prevent post-traumatic stress disorder. Judgment is critical. Officers often have to make split-second decisions based in fact and law and more often than not, common sense. The job's progressed so much more just catching bad people and making arrests. It's a lot more complicated and become more of almost a community caretaker, social worker aspect to the job. To me, the critical component is having sound policies and good supervision. And we make sure all of our officers receive proper training, and the supervisors also receive advanced training. Every police officer attends a Certified Police Academy. They earn a certificate from the Police Training Commission. In addition, there is a host of training that goes on in-house throughout the year, mandated by the Attorney General's office and department requirements. One of the issues we're dealing with right now is a surge in suicides. So we are providing suicide prevention and intervention training for officers for mental health issues. We've had 6 suicides this year just since January. We're also dealing with the opiate epidemic, where we've had 7 to 8 overdoses already.
There I am, just suffering in the aftermath of everything that had happened. And I was about to lose my mind. I've got 3 degrees, a degree in psychology, chemistry, and Spanish. But here I am trying to get a hold of reality, trying to separate what's real and what's an illusion, what's driven by fear. Just completely dying in depression. There was no hope. I lost everything. And my whole life revolved around getting high. I couldn't wake up in the morning and shave unless I had a pain pill. Because of my addiction, everything was stripped away to where I was left with nothing. Eventually moved back home and experienced just a depth of brokenness over the next 3 years until eventually I came to treatment. But the reason I'm here is to tell you that you can recover. So that's why I'm here today. You know, it's just another opportunity to remove the stigma. People don't want to talk about addiction. There's shame surrounding it. There's silence surrounding it. I just want to be one of the ones speaking up and saying, hey, look, yeah, I went through it, but I've recovered, and so can you.
Over the last 7 years, our crime index has actually dropped by 48%. We've been very effective in reducing crime, and we're going to be engaging in a program known as DDAX, which is an acronym for Data-Driven Approaches to Crime and Traffic Safety, in the very near future, where we're going to use data to help coordinate our enforcement efforts. The main police number is 732-615-2100. People can call 911. We also have an anonymous tip line. We have email system set up. We get messages on social media, so we're very accessible and open to the public. And there's a direct correlation between the drug epidemic and crime. Often people that are suffering from a substance abuse disorder cannot maintain a job. They do not have a steady income, and they'll turn to crime to steal. And unfortunately, we have a perfect storm where we have heroin prices are at record low levels and gold prices are record high. So you'll have, it does not take a lot of gold to steal, to sell at a secondhand We Buy Gold marketplace, and you know, for an addict to have money to go buy heroin.
I can look back over my life and see when people come at me with condemnation or pointing a finger, that it resulted in me isolating more and withdrawing.
For people with addictions, we get to a place to where we're so down on ourselves we don't think that anybody could love us. And that's very important, to have that love again.
I could say that I would wish that somebody would have told me that, you know, that there was hope. I felt like that I was the one person out of a million that lived a different lifestyle. That not everybody out there went through the things that I've been through. So for somebody to come and tell me, you know, there's hope for you, would have spoke volumes to me.
I want people to know there's hope. You don't have to live a hopeless life. It's okay, because I'm not the only one hurting. I'm not the only one that's been abused and rejected and struggling. It's okay. And I would just, if that was me, if I seen myself back then, see myself now, and two different people, I would just hug her and say, it's okay. You're loved.
You know, here's two people that's been through it, been there, done that, and they're living a successful life now. Like we said earlier, you know, it's about hope, and that's going to give somebody hope.
We're seeing a resurgence of heroin in our area. It's worse than I've ever seen it in my career. Right now, it is the single biggest challenge to our community and our department. It's reached an epidemic crisis level at this point. The biggest issue in our area is the purity of the heroin itself. The Drug Enforcement Administration field tests heroin around the country regionally, and consistently, heroin in the Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York area is over 75% pure. Plus, it's being mixed with fentanyl, which can be up to 50 times the potency of heroin. As far as the science of addiction, I couldn't explain it adequately, but sadly, we've had overdose victims that we have revived 4 and 5 times that have eventually succumbed to an overdose.
Well, Chad was a good kid growing up. He was well respected, I think, in the community, very loving kid. I'd never had any problems with Chad prior to his involvement with drugs, which was his ultimate death. Then on Thursday morning, about 8 o'clock, I got a call from the police department, and they were telling me that about what had happened. But at first I thought, oh my gosh, he's had a wreck. To only find out that the coroner came on and pronounced it he had died from a drug overdose. It's an old farm that I grew up on, and when Chad was smaller and we'd ride the four-wheeler all over the old farm, he'd say, Dad, I want to have a house here someday. I said, no, son, we can't afford to get the electricity because it's a half a mile up this one little drain, you know. So I thought it was very appropriate that, and of course my wife was living then, and we decided that we would donate this property to get Chance Hope. To lose a child is very, very difficult. And of course, 1 year after that, I lost my wife. And I'm not wanting sympathy. The only thing I'm saying is life has to go on. And if I can take something that's bad and give somebody hope or a pat on the back, then that's my contribution.
You know, it has been said that we're not going to, quote unquote, arrest our way out of this situation. However, between 2015 and 2016, our arrest numbers for drug-related offenses surged by 50%, from just over 200 to just over 300. So it is an important component. We are very active in enforcing the drug and alcohol laws. In Middletown, as in the rest of New Jersey, marijuana is classified as a drug and is illegal, with the exception of people who are patients for medical marijuana use. Typically what we see is marijuana under 50 grams, which is considered a disorderly person's offense. It's not a crime in the state, and most often people, after a 1 year period, receive what's known as a conditional discharge, and it's removed from their record if they were arrested. We have an officer embedded in a federal task force who works undercover. We have another officer with a county level task force works within the region. We have a number of detectives in our own detective bureau that do narcotics work. We have a very effective patrol force. An officer last night made an arrest for heroin and actually was stabbed several times with a hypodermic needle from the suspect resisting arrest.
It didn't matter who I hurt. Every moral that I grew up with, I was always taught not to steal, not to lie, not to curse, anything like that. All those went out the window when you got a little bit sick. And those are the hardest things to come back from. I stole from my parents. I stole from my grandparents. I lied. I cheated. I did whatever I had to do when I got sick to make myself feel better. It's real easy to get clean. The hard part's staying clean. You still have the world. You still have all the problems you created for yourself. For me, being a convicted felon, that was the hardest part. Every time I fill out a job application, every time I do anything, they know my past. And a lot of times you don't get your chance to explain yourself about your past. I wish that I could have seen that I was hurting my children. I was hurting my wife, my mother, my father. I was hurting everyone. But I was too selfish to realize or accept that. I thought that this all revolved around me, part of that entitlement. It's all about me. Well, it's not. It's not about me. It's about everyone else. And when I figured that out, then I could get somewhere. For people with addictions, we get to a place to where we're so down on ourselves we don't think that anybody could love us. And that's very important, to have that love again.
With the advent of fentanyl that we've seen in our area in heroin, it poses a serious danger to our officers. It could kill someone just by contact through the skin. So we just recently purchased N95 masks for respiratory protection and some additional suiting to protect the officers from potential hazards. We have been using Narcan overdose antidote since June of 2014, and the ages of the victim we've administered to have ranged from 15 to 68 years of age. One area where the county has been very supportive is they have initiated a program in participation with the area hospitals where they replenish our Narcan supply, which is a significant cost. We've had as many as 34 deployments a year, and some victims it's multiple doses. And we have an exchange program now with the area hospitals at no cost. The police officer brings the empty Narcan to the hospital. They will replenish it and replace it at no cost to us.
It's funny, the day my family found out I got in a fight, and I had got knocked unconscious and drugged to the ER, and they drug tested me, and I failed for 7 different chemicals with Valium and barbiturates, Oxycontin, marijuana, cocaine. If, I didn't fail my drug test. It was, the test melted in the cup. And that's how my family found out. And it was a holy God moment for them. All that I was and all that I held dear was erased by this constant desire to get high, hating what I became, hating carrying caskets, hating above all things going to a funeral and looking at a grandmother, looking at a mom, that look on their faces. There's no replacing that feeling. It's amazing the capacity of human forgiveness, that I could find forgiveness in this town, that I could find forgiveness for people whose families I'd helped break, children that I had led astray, that people that I had influenced so negatively, and to be able to be welcomed back into society that I'd helped drastically destroy.
Well, often we find ourselves not making an arrest. Since the Overdose Prevention Act passed, we get a lot more calls for overdoses because we've placed an emphasis on saving lives rather than making arrests. We've kind of moved from enforcement into treatment and recovery. So often when we're called to scene of an overdose, we will seize drugs, heroin, needles, any kind of paraphernalia, but the patient and any witnesses that were present that summoned the help usually are referred for treatment. Every police officer now carries naloxone, which is a nasal spray that acts as an antidote for opiate overdoses. Every time we are called to the scene of a drug overdose, we distribute flyers for the Middletown Crossroads program, which does assessments, outpatient treatment, and provides support for the families and those suffering with addiction. I think a lot of times it's shock and disbelief where it's something that's going on often in the home, and the parents are either unaware of it or they're in denial about the situation. We derive information from a variety of sources, but often it is from parents and concerned citizens in the community.
I am a drug court case specialist. I work with drug court participants, and it's a behavior modification program, help them get sober and learn how to live healthy lives and be productive citizens again. I think there was always a part of me that felt like I didn't fit in and felt different from others and didn't really know how to cope, most of all with things like deaths, traumatic situations, and I became involved with some people that were familiar with drugs and used that as a coping mechanism, and quickly that became my coping mechanism as well. What I wish I would have known is more about the disease of addiction. You learn about drugs and that they're bad for you when you're younger, but you don't really know what addiction really is. And you think, well, that's not going to be me, that won't happen to me, but you don't know, it's a mental disease. And I believe I was born an alcoholic, and whenever I used drugs and alcohol, it set that off. Just knowing the desperation and being able to feel the same things that people are going through, that having that empathy for them and that common bond of pain and suffering is a true blessing, to be able to meet somebody where they're at and give them hope. That's what really keeps me sober today.
You could have a situation where a parent is hosting a graduation party, a prom party, something of that nature, and if there's drugs or alcohol present that are provided and a tragedy were to ensue, a drunk driving accident, fatal accident, something of that nature, they could be liable and sued civilly and lose their home. I worked in the traffic safety unit for a number of years. I was also on the Monmouth County SCORT team, which is an acronym for Serious Collision Analysis Response Team, for 2 years, and we dealt with drunk driving fatalities on an almost regular basis, and they're all devastating and have an impact. Already this year we have had between 7 and 8 drug-related fatalities. We're still waiting for the autopsy, so it's not conclusive on a few of them, but I've never seen those types of numbers in town before in my career. In Middletown, we're trying to focus on prevention to make a difference, working with our youth. We run 2 police youth week camps every summer. In addition, we teach the Too Good for Drugs curriculum with the Law Enforcement Against Drugs program in all 12 elementary schools. We also participate in Project Plus, which is an evening program with the Parks and Recreation Department and Root Awakening that we provide with the high schools. In addition, we're partnering with the Institute for Prevention, which is a state-funded grant being administered by the Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Foundation. It will be implemented very shortly, and if we have someone that overdoses on an opiate and they receive Narcan, if they're transported to Bayshore Hospital, they will bring a recovery coach to the hospital, to the bedside, and they will get that person in inpatient treatment, regardless of whether they have the ability to pay or medical insurance. It'll be covered by the grant. I personally was born and raised here in Middletown. Like many of our officers, we live and work in the community, dedicated to serving the community, and we deeply appreciate the community support.
Was offered a drug, chose to try it. Felt weird, but good. Chose to try it again, started looking for chances to get high. Flunked a few tests at school, missed Mom's birthday. Found a connection to score drugs, quit after school stuff to get a job. Used the money to help pay for drugs, was tired a lot. Started showing up late to work, got fired. Told Mom and Dad I quit. Met kids from another school and started dealing. Got busted for drug possession. Dad picked me up at the station house. Things seemed hopeless. Felt sad for no reason. Couldn't seem to shake the blues. Opted for treatment instead of juvie. Heard all about how drugs were bad for my health. Didn't listen. Got high with a friend once treatment was over. Began to feel out of touch. Things went downhill fast at home. Chose to go back to treatment. This time, for real. Started to feel different after a few months. Calmer, more hopeful. Learned a lot about drugs and how they affect my body and my mind. Didn't graduate from high school with great grades, but did graduate.
Life's complicated enough. Make smart decisions about drugs.
Science has given us an understanding about what happens in a brain of a person that's addicted. And by allowing us to actually find out what areas of the brain are not working and why, it provides a means to develop new interventions that hopefully can remediate some of the changes, or if not, help individuals be able to cope better so that they can stop taking drugs. For many years, people that are addicted are dismissed because of the stance that they only have poor control, and if they exerted more effort, they would be able to control the urges. What we've come to understand is, by using brain imaging technologies, is that the areas of the brain that allows us to exert self-control and make decisions and carry them through are actually disturbed by the effects of drugs. And so a person that's addicted to drugs cannot properly execute their free will. They cannot stop taking the drug even though they may consciously want to do it. Drug addiction is extraordinarily important because it afflicts a very large number of individuals, and it doesn't discriminate. And the other problem about drug addiction is it's a chronic disease of the young. So people get afflicted by addiction very early on in their late teens, early 20s. And if they don't get treated, there's a good likelihood that this will produce significant disruption throughout the rest of their life. So the relative effect of drugs into the well-being of and our health is going to vary tremendously depending on the drug, depending also on your genes. Some people can smoke until they are age 100 years old and they never develop cancer, whereas many will develop cancer. So it is, again, a difference on genetics. Treatment for drug addiction works. We have to recognize that it is a chronic disease. So it works. Treatment works. What we cannot claim that it does is that it cures addiction, but it can treat it. And when you compare it to other diseases like asthma or diabetes or hypertension, the relapse rate that you see with addiction is not any different from these other classical medical illnesses.
A lot of us have an idea in our heads about what a person addicted to drugs looks like. But the truth is, anyone can become addicted to drugs. Addiction is when you feel a strong urge to keep taking a drug, even if it is causing harm. Ever hear someone with a drug problem talk about quitting? And then they try to quit on their own with no help. They tell their friends they've given up drugs forever. It usually doesn't work. Eventually, they slip and start using again. Why are drugs so hard to quit? Because addiction is a brain disease. Addiction is when you feel a strong urge to keep taking a drug, even if it is causing harm. To stop, ask for help. Your brain is like a control tower. It sends out signals that direct your actions and choices. When you take drugs, the chemical signals in your brain change. This affects your choices, your actions, and even the way you feel. The part of your brain that lets you feel pleasure can be changed by drugs. Normally, this pleasure center is active when you eat, fall in love, or experience something else you enjoy. After a while, the drug becomes more important. When someone takes a drug, they first feel a rush or a high. But over time, the high is not as strong, and they need the drug to keep from feeling bad. This is what happens when you are addicted. But you don't have to stay that way. To stop, ask for help. Drug addiction doesn't depend on your income, your job, your age, race, or color. Addiction is a disease of the brain, and it can happen to anyone. You probably already know that you can become addicted to tobacco, alcohol, and illegal drugs. But even prescription drugs can be addictive when not taken as directed or when you take medication not prescribed for you. There are scientists who study drug abuse. Their research has taught us a lot about what makes you more likely to become addicted to drugs. Things like having family members who have had a drug problem, starting drugs at a young age, having mental health problems like depression, or hanging around other people who use drugs, all put you at risk. But you do not become addicted if you don't take drugs. If you or someone you love has a problem, get help. And if you do become addicted, you can be treated and you can recover.